All right, today we're talking about raising hero kids. All right, I'm super excited for this podcast, you guys. We have Alan here with us who is going to walk us through how to raise hero kids, because he was a kid not that long ago, as you can tell just by looking at him. But what we love about Alan, what he's going to bring to this topic today is Alan is a professional speaker. You'll hear that in the way he talks. He's very savvy, and he knows what he's talking about. The guy knows his stuff, and I love how passionate he is about his topic. He has so many areas of expertise that he's going to bring. He's into natural fitness. He is a natural fitness coach. That means none of the junk goes in his body. He's all natural, el natural. We love that about him too. He's a male model. That's really hard to believe, right? Men's physique athlete. He's also the co-host of the Hyper Conscious podcast. So you guys got to check that out. We'll have a link for you to go look at that. Alan's primary focus, though, is helping the younger demographic to achieve their dreams, their dream physique, and to create a deeper meaning and high purpose in everything that they do. That's why he's with us today. That's why Alan's message is so relevant to the Hero Mom, because he's going to help us understand how we can bring this out in our kids too. So Alan helps people, really what he does is he helps people to look as good on the outside as they are on the inside by focusing on what he refers to the 5 fundamental pillars of natural fitness. So this is so important for us, you guys, to understand as hero moms. And that's why I wanted to say the whole thing. Alan's done so much work on himself to bring this out. And he's going to be sharing these things with us. The 3 things that I want to cover with you guys with Alan today, and all of us hero moms here on this podcast are so excited to talk about these things with him, is that, first of all, our kids need real role models. This is what we're talking about that's going to raise hero kids, real role models. Alan's going to talk to us about that. We have lots of questions for him in this area, but also hero kids have to have a dream. Do you guys know what your kids' dreams are? Like, really know what their dreams are. We're going to dig into that. And then also, hero kids need to have a health foundation. And we have so many things. You know, Hero Mom is about health too. So we love that we have this topic in common with Alan. Let's dig into that first piece, Alan. Hero kids need real role models. Now, you know, we should probably define what that means, because we all understand role model, but the way you're talking about it, what do you mean by that?
So first and foremost, I'll get into a little bit of how I kind of lacked a male role model growing up. My father passed away when I was 2 years old, and I had several different father figures in my life, but no one unifying male role model. And so when I started to get older and after college, I started to recognize that a lot of people maybe are not into personal development. And there's this great Jim Rohn quote that I'm sure you've all heard that I always go back to, where he says, always work harder on yourself than you do at your job. And I feel like I didn't have a very strong guide growing up of someone who really worked really hard on themselves when it came to their health, their personal development, expanding their mind, learning, growing, you know, beyond just sort of public education. So I always say this, I say people will rarely do what you say, but they'll almost always do what you do. You're going to become, as you know, the sum average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, whether it's fitness, business, finance, you name it, like that seems to reign true. So I think that the first, being a real role model for the next generation, I think what that means is embodying something that they desire first, and then trying to pull back the curtain with little teachable moments along the way, breadcrumbs, if you will, of like how they can achieve that as well. Like, you know, if you have their desired result, then you have an opportunity. They're now open to maybe the process that was behind the scenes to what would achieve that result. So I think that leading by example is everything.
Now that one, when you were explaining that to me, that hit home hard for me because, ever since I really became aware of creating a legacy for my kids, being a role model was huge for me. I mean, it was an absolute intentional day-to-day consciousness. But my idea of being a good role model versus, when we were talking about bringing this topic up, you opened my eyes to look at that in a completely different way than I ever did. And, Hero Moms, what we know is we want to stay relevant in the lives of our kids. And so we make all this effort to be there, be present, be at the stuff, be in there, involved in what it is that they're doing. But as I understood later, when one time I couldn't be at my kid's event and I was like, I'm so sorry, I can't be there. And he's like, I don't care, no big deal, whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm there all the time. You appreciate that. That's important to you, right? And he was just like, no, it really doesn't matter. I was like, dang it, because I really thought that was the thing that mattered. And in talking to you, I realized, it just clicked with me, that I was always forming in my mind what a good role model was based on my definition of how I wanted to be relevant in their lives versus what he actually was looking for. So can you help us understand, what is a kid, we're talking like junior high to high school mentalities is where we need to be like clicking into this. Explain what it is that they're looking for to embody, right? Is that what you said, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first met you, we connected right away, and I love what you do. I love your mission because growing up, obviously we had a lot of loss in the family early on, and I grew up around a lot of pain and suffering. And I think that the only way to really cure a lot of pain and suffering is personal development, to retool and climb out of those dark holes. I always say that, the tools that you need to attain in order to climb out of dark places are also what builds skyscrapers. So to get to your question though, I think that others' consciousness is where to start. So I think we grow up in a fairly egocentric culture where we tend to focus a lot, especially kids. So kids are very, very focused on, their brains are developing, and the parts of their brains that create others' consciousness are not necessarily fully developed, and they don't have the experience necessarily. And to be frank, they don't have the consistent failures necessary to be humble enough most times to realize that it's not about them and that it is something bigger than them. You can kind of try to teach them these principles, but it's got to be led by example again. So I think the first thing is figuring out, and you mentioned this in the pre-podcast, that figuring out what your child geeks out on. I think that's super important. One thing I'll say that my mom did very well was I was a professional gamer growing up. I was super into basketball. I was super into cross country, and she always has been my biggest cheerleader. So I'll give her that. She always put the wind in my sails. But I think that when it comes to having genuine interest in the things that your kids are doing is great. But I think on top of that, living in your own passions and leading by example that way, I think is absolutely critical. Because I have one client, I won't mention any names, but her parents both, we've kind of found, have been very depressed for a very long time, and during her formative years. And one of her biggest challenges, I always use this quote, this is something that I had come up with, the suppression of self-expression leads to depression. And so her parents are extremely stoic, and they always kind of were. And so the first question you got to ask, and if you guys know Tony Robbins, he always asks his attendees this, he says, whose love did you crave most growing up? And then how did you get love? Like, what did you have to do to get love? For me, it was to achieve. And for her, it was I asked her this question on one of our coaching calls, and she said, to be strong. And then I went one thing deeper. Well, first I asked her, who did you crave love from most? What's your gut instinct? Not who did you love more, who did you crave love from most? And she immediately said her dad. And that typically tends to be the case with females that I've found. And then I asked, what did you need to be for your father? And she immediately came up with strong. And I said, okay, what does that mean? She basically means I needed to be strong and quiet and like not be vulnerable, right? Which for a feminine energy is just not necessarily living in your truth. So I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do know that we get wired a certain way growing up based on the modeling that we see in our environment. And for me personally, and I don't want to dive too deep into this rabbit hole, but like alcohol was very modeled growing up. Like I was around a lot of alcohol, and go figure, I drank a lot in the tail end of high school, drank a ton in college, and to be frank, I think bad habits over time can create disaster, and that was one of the things that I regret most. But once I stepped out of that as an adult and I had some big failures in my life, my relationships or school or whatever it was, I kind of had to look and go, oh, wow. I had one friend in particular, actually, who came over. He didn't know me growing up, and he saw the environment that I grew up in terms of the partying. And he said, Alan, if you want to know why you have an alcohol problem, it's like, there it is. It's like a fish in water. You think this is normal. It's not necessarily normal. It's just normal to you. Right. So I think that living in your own passions and really like being happy, healthy, and productive in your own life is going to be the top thing. And again, I'm not a parent, so I can't pretend to know all the answers, but I do know that I want to be the greatest father I can be. And I think that it's going to start with me leading by example and like making sure that I'm living a fulfilling, happy, healthy, productive life myself. And then everything I take interest in outside of that part is going to be, focused on my children. So,
Ellen, could I ask you a question?
Of course.
So, I'm living this lifestyle. I'm role modeling it all the time for my children, but I do have a problem. I mean, I am a single mom with 4 children and one in a wheelchair, but my boys are you talked about gaming, and that's a big problem right now. And my kids were just like, if you want us to do what we love, well, this is what we love doing right now. Cause I'll ask them questions, and they're kind of like, get off my back. Cause I'm like, why don't you go and do this? And why don't you go? But we don't want to. This is what we love to do. And they are with friends per se, some, and they're passionate about it. And I mean, literally they're like, they want to get they want to get to the next level. And like, they're doing this. Like, I feel like a failure as a mom because I'm letting them do this for so many hours. And I feel stuck like with that. Like, that's where I'm kind of like, am I being a good mom? Am I being a bad mom? I'm stuck with that. So I don't know. Could you help me with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that question. I grew up as a professional gamer. So I was born in '88. The first professional game that I played was StarCraft 2. It came out in 1998, but video games were a big part of my upbringing. And so there's a couple things I'll say about that. One is esports. The industry itself is absolutely blowing up. I think the next 4 industries to blow up are esports number 1, social media number 2, consumer robotics number 3, and then smartware, which is like Google Glass or Fitbit, that kind of stuff, Apple Watch. But I think esports is huge. So like there's ESPN4 right now that has professional gaming online. And a lot of the people that I used to be a professional Halo 2 gamer. I was top 20th in the world. And a lot of my friends that I used to play with are now multimillionaires. So one thing that I think parents are afraid of is that that's not a real career. It's more so a real career now than ever before. That said, you guys grew up playing outdoors and stuff. I grew up on a lake. I was always outside. So I feel like I had a good balance. But I gotta say that I did become quite obsessed with gaming, and I actually got to the point where I was monetizing it. And if you've ever heard of a company called Twitch TV, so twitch.tv, you can go on there and you can watch people play games for a living, and you gain subscribers. I actually have a close friend of mine who came on the podcast. His name is Josh Bryan, and he makes like a lot of money doing that. So if your concern is their career in the future, or like their academics now is suffering, like I do believe there's quite a strong investment in the now in terms of socializing. If it's competitive gaming specifically, I think it developed my mind a lot because I don't know if you know what a real-time strategy game is or first-person shooters, but those games are very, very intense, and they definitely forced my brain to grow and adapt, and the neuroplasticity, my brain definitely developed. And I also went to a tech school, so I'm a little biased. I went to WPI, and we were all kind of geeking out on the whole. Halo 2 was the first massive multiplayer first-person shooter online game, and I kind of rode that train with all my friends. We still get together sometimes and play games. I think there's pros and cons to anything. I think I'm a little bit biased because I do know some people who went on the other end and who, played MMOs that weren't quite as competitive, that were kind of just maybe not developing their brain as much and not socializing as much, more of like the hermit side of things. So I guess you got to kind of gauge where your kid is on that spectrum, what games they're playing. And I guess you'd want to make sure that, number one, it's something competitive, so it's going to breed greatness and drive and ambition. Number two, that maybe there's a market for it in the future if they get really, really good at it. And then number three, that they're actually socializing and interacting with other people. Because I'll make this story quick, but I went to WPI and I went from, straight A's in high school to a technical college where I was not the smartest at all. But I did realize one thing. I was an electrical and computer engineer, and I struggled hard with engineering courses compared to my friends. But one thing that I did notice is as soon as I got into corporate America and into business, socializing is king. Understanding human beings, being able to communicate effectively is everything. So if the games aren't social, I would definitely be more concerned.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have to, Jenny, that was such a good question. I know, Kelly, you're freaking out and probably have some questions too, because her son's a gamer.
You're speaking his love language, totally.
I'm just picturing us going from get off the games, go outside and play, to don't go out and play, get inside and get on the games. And go talk to your online friends.
Right.
It's just like a totally different way of us having to think. And this is what we're talking about. Like, if we don't understand the stuff that, and I'll be honest, like 50% of what you just said, I had no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard some of that stuff. This is exactly how we make ourselves not relevant in the lives of our kids. And it's not that we have to go and figure out what are all the things that our kids are, that kids our age, or the age of our kids, that they could be interested in, but what are our kids interested in? And we better know about that.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm understanding? And then on the embody part, because this is the question that I asked you when you said embody, what it is that they, they're interested in, what they want to become. And I was like, man, that means I got to go like be an expert in Fortnite now because my daughter likes that. But I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to spend my time doing that. But you clarified that beautifully when I asked you that question. So I want to ask you that question again. But before I ask it to you, before you answer, I want to make sure if Kelly had any questions about the gaming stuff, since her son is so into it. Kelly, were you like itching to ask any questions on
I
that?
actually do, and this might roll into something else, so I apologize if I take us off course. But I love what you said, because I try really hard to stay relevant in my son's life. I watch, Fortnite skirmishes with him, not because I love that, but because I love him, and I want to have something to talk about, knowing what he's doing. And he's not outside. I mean, I might have been Pong champion on Atari in my day. But,
Absolutely.
But, and we have some other things in common, like technical stuff. He's doing some coding. That's my, some of the work that I do. But you talk about personal development and real role models. And he's out of my hands, 8 hours of a day, every single day in school. Mm-hmm. So we have our conversation in the morning. He doesn't play games in the morning, but we'll have our conversation. We catch up on news. The last thing I say to him is, be awesome, dude. I love you. And he's like, okay, mom. He's like, okay, mom. Yeah. Whatever. But I know he hears that. So, but I'm not sitting on his shoulder at school. So how do I weave that in for him when he's, and maybe just what I do every day kind of lets me sit on his shoulder, maybe as the angel or the devil, I don't know. But, how do I assure that he's getting, without having you go into his school, that type of thing. How am I sure? Because I give him books, little, like that kids can kind of understand. Okay, mom, that's kind of what I get. Whether he looks at them, I'm not 100% sure. We'll have conversations. We've done love language. I know what his love language is. He knows mine. But beyond that, when he's not with me, when I don't have that time to insert my influence on him.
How old is your son?
Really quick, and Alan, before you answer that, I think it goes with my question, so I want to insert that question too, and you like morph those into fuse them together. But my question was going to be if embody what they want to become doesn't mean go be an expert at Fortnite, if that's what they're interested in, what does it mean? And I think that maybe could work with the answer that you're going to give to Kelly right now.
100%. So first and foremost, how old is your son, Kelly?
He's 15. 15.
Okay, perfect. So this is, so first I'll answer Paula's first. So you don't have to embody and necessarily play Fortnite, but I think that living in something that you're really passionate about and mastery driven. So something that you're fully immersed in, something that you're working every single day to get better at. And I think having your own dreams will inevitably inspire anyone around you to have big dreams. And then maybe inherently your children will connect the dots of like, oh, well, if there's a culture around me of people that are chasing dreams and I'm really into Fortnite or whatever it might be, maybe I could be the best Fortnite player in the world. Maybe I could get on a team. These teams have coaches. Like the esports industry is definitely something you guys are going to want to look into because there's a reason why it's bigger than what a lot of people realize. So I had some friends growing up that were not allowed to play video games, and my mom did allow me to do that. That's another one of the things that she trusted that me following my passions would be a good thing. And it very much was. And a lot of the kids that were not able to follow those passions and get really, really good at something, that's the thing about self-confidence. Like competence and self-confidence, I think, are super linked. And I got really, really good at video games because I was allowed the opportunity to play them and master them and remaster them in a socialized learning environment. So I think having your own sort of culture of dream chasing will inevitably get them to connect the dots of this is for something greater. The thing about kids, and this is something that's part of my mission, is creating a culture where you're not just focused on today. Like creating a culture where you're trying to integrate what's awesome today with what's best for your future simultaneously. And I do think that video games may play a role in that, whether it comes from brain development, socialized learning, creating groups of friends, and then just potentially dreams in the esports industry. But yeah, I think you embodying that is going to inevitably rub off. And then when you're doing awesome, cool things, like you said, your son is away from you 8 hours a day. So I have two things to say about that. Number one, when you're really pumped about life and you're doing something that's really cool and that you're pumped about, your son is inevitably going to ask and notice, most likely. And then those are the teachable moments. As soon as they ask, then you have like this light up moment of, oh, okay, now I can impart some wisdom while trying to stay cool as well. And then the second thing is when they are at school, their influences are critical. And for me, this is kind of where I would come in. And it's not just me, it's anyone who you consider a strong role model, but that's closer to them, because there is a strong disconnect between a 45-year-old or a 40-year-old, or I'm not trying to say you guys are that old. I don't know all of your ages. I'm sorry. But like a 15-year-old, it is hard to relate to a 50-year-old. And if there's someone that can bridge that gap in between that is into personal development and has dreams and understands both sides. You know, one of my things in my career that I was most successful at was I spoke marketing and I spoke engineering. So I could speak both languages, and I would listen to these engineers talk to these marketers. I was in a product management team, and I would be like, neither one of them knows what the other person's talking about. And I need to like mediate. So I don't know if you know, like you guys have probably been on YouTube a lot. There's a lot of people like you that are younger that are trying to be leaders in the, you know, thought leadership industry that I guarantee you guys as kids are either already listening to or would be open to listening to. Like Elliot Hulse comes to mind, someone like me, maybe different people like that have big dreams. Maybe even in the esports industry. I haven't looked too much into it, but.
Yeah, that's awesome. Esports is one of the things that my son's very interested in. And sometimes as an older woman, and, I was a little bit of an older mom than some of my friends, but you know, it's hard. When I grew up, is like, you're supposed to do this. This is what you're supposed to do. And entrepreneurship is for people who are super smart and have money already, you know? So it's like, I'm trying to move forward and create my own business and move HEROMOM ahead. And I'm trying not to tell my son, well, you can't do that because that's not a real job. You know, but esports didn't exist when I was growing up. So esports, I know, is going to blow up. And so when he talks about that, I have to really, really, really listen, because times are changing. We didn't have cell phones when I was growing up, you know, that's how the world is changing. So I love, you know, he watches a lot on YouTube. Sometimes some things that surprise me a whole lot. So I will insert some of those names that that you gave. So thank you. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I think it's a really good point, Alan, that you made, that our kids do. My daughter's on YouTube constantly. She's 16. And she is paying attention. You know, I don't sit there and quote motivational passages or anything like that to her, but she will send me messages sometimes, those screenshots, or just, you know, type it out, motivational quotes. And she'll just say, "Here, Mom, I saw this today and I just thought you would like that. It just seemed like you." So it just shows that she's paying attention. You know, she's watching what it is that we're doing. And now she works for me. So she gets to see a lot of the stuff that I do from behind the scenes as well, which is really super awesome. I wanted to ask you to clarify something that you said, and this can be the last point on the role models, unless any of you other ladies have a question on this piece. But one thing that you said that I thought was really profound, that we need to understand better from your perspective and how you're bringing this out when you're working with kids. And that is that an airplane?
Somebody's got a tornado going on.
I thought that was Alan's invisible super airplane coming to pick him up. You said, give your kids access to environments that breed greatness. I thought that was such an awesome thing that you said. What does that look like for our kids in a digital world?
Totally. So the first thing to get a pulse on that, that's such a good question. Something that is growth oriented. So you guys obviously have heard of the book that talks about growth mindset and fixed mindset. Something that's mastery driven, an environment where dreams are encouraged, goals are encouraged. So it breaks my heart that we were never taught how to set goals in school. I don't know if you guys were, but I wasn't. And to me, like, one of the biggest detriments to any human, we are goal-oriented creatures, and if we weren't taught to set specific goals that are from our own hearts, like, we are going to just drift around to whatever influences are the most shiny. And in a world of shiny objects, that is happening so much. There's this great quote where, if you can have the best ship with the best captain in the world, but if it doesn't know where to go, the tide is just going to take them wherever. And I feel like so many people live that life, and that's why it's become my mission to get people to realize that it's not about the dream. It's about the journey that the dream will force you to embark upon, the people it will force you to meet, the fears it will force you to chase, the networking skills, the sales skills, all of the skills, who you become, ideally. And so what does a environment look like? Sharp minds. You know what? I'll just say this. So I have a little cousin. Her name's Lenya. She's 22. She goes to Bridgewater State. She is just an awesome human being. Beautiful, smart, funny. I said this. I said, Lenya, like, I know that you have a lot of friends, and I just want to impart some wisdom on you. She was talking about this one friend in particular who's like next level intelligent and super ambitious and has big goals and dreams and like is a really good person and into fitness and all that stuff. I said, find more people like that. Like, if someone does not have ambition, they will inevitably slip into vices over virtues. Right. Without ambition, like I can tell you from my own experience, like, if I didn't want to be the greatest natural aesthetic men's physique fitness model on the planet, I would still be drinking. You know, like, you have to have a reason greater than the now to force you to live in the things that are more challenging, but also more fulfilling in the long run. So I would get them into an environment where sharp minds sharpen one another, ambitious people who, you know, if your dream is to just kind of do what you're already doing, then you don't have to read more books, right? You don't have to take more courses. You don't have to get around better people. You don't have to get mentors. So, one, ambition; two, clear-cut goal consciousness, and a growth mindset. So an environment with all of those pieces, I think, is absolutely huge.
Love it. Huge.
We need to get you in the schools.
Right.
Like,
He's doing that.
Well, good, because I like Brendan Burchard. I was like talking to his mom, and I was like, why isn't Brendan in the schools? And they said, you know, they tried to do this, but something happened. One person like stopped it, and it's just, he just didn't. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm like, this needs to happen, because again, where we are today, if I had this, I can't go back. I cannot start over again. But if I had this growing up, what would my life look like today? I wouldn't be where I am today. I needed to go through all that struggle to get where I am today. But my God, if I had this information, if I had these books, if I had these people back when I was your age, younger than that, what life could I have lived? My God,
Anyone you want.
Exactly. And it gives me the chills, because I'm like, oh, so now all these youngsters that are around me, not youngsters, I said youngsters, all of my kids' friends that come here, I love it because my kids are actually, even though my kids sometimes won't talk to me a lot, they're guiding their friends to come and talk to me. So I know that they are watching me. I know that I'm doing good. And if I could influence them and guide them, and this is what I do, I you know, and then I help them out, and it just makes me feel good. But yes, we need to get you over here and in all the schools.
I would love that. It is a huge part of my mission to get into as many schools as possible. Any referrals would be greatly appreciated.
I think I'm sorry.
Audience, I just want to say, audience, you heard that right there. You want Alan in your kids' schools, or reach out to him and reach out to your school and make the connection. This is hugely significant for your kids' lives. Love that. Go ahead, Kelly. Sorry.
That's okay. For any of the hero moms that are out there listening to, you know, what I'm hearing is that, like, I'm sitting here listening, hanging on to every word that's being said. We are here all hungry for more information and to better ourselves. And we want to be influential to our kids, but we also have to remember, we have to hang on their words a little bit too. That's when we have to remember to listen. That's one of the messages I'm getting, is we need to listen to them too, and what they want and what their needs are, not just what we want to impart on them, because it might be different and you might be surprised.
I'm also hearing that we're not what I thought I was, which was the molder. I mold them into the adults that they're supposed to be, but We're really facilitators. We're facilitating them to be the greatest version of themselves. So that's going to lead me to the next point, Alan. I'm dying to hear what you want to share with us, your wisdom that you want to share with us about kids having, hero kids need to have mentors. Or sorry, not mentors. Yeah, mentors. You talked about mentors and having a dream. Can you explain that to us? Because when I think of mentors, I'm like, those are for adults. You know, like, we pay a lot of money to have a mentor and a coach. And, you know, I never heard of mentors. Of course, we have them in our lives growing up. We just never thought of them that way. So to help us understand the relevance of a mentor to a child without feeling threatened as their parent, you know, like, no, I want that influence. I don't want anybody else to have that kind of influence. Like, how do we balance that with helping them discover their dreams?
100%. So, again, I'm not a parent, so I can only imagine how. I wrote a quote on my Instagram earlier. It said that matters of the heart are the most difficult. And so when it comes to your children, you know, it takes unbelievable courage to let go and have someone else guide them. So I don't have children, but I can only imagine, because matters of the heart are always the most challenging. So first and foremost, so I'll give kind of a framework that I always use. And I mentioned this in the pre-podcast, but Brendan Burchard has that 3 buckets thing. I kind of innovated on top of it, and I want to give him credit. But if you have progress towards your dreams at the top, and then you have 5 buckets. On the far left, you've got what I call the nostalgia bucket. This is family. This is people you grew up with, people that have kind of known you your whole life. The next bucket is the maintenance bucket. This is old friends that you will typically see at high school reunions or birthday parties or weddings. People in your past that you maybe no longer have the similar core values and maybe aren't headed where you're headed. Different train tracks, right? Different goals. Then you've got the mentee bucket, which is people that you mentor and that you coach and that you guide. So for example, there's that, I forget what the name of the organization is, but basically you have a little brother or a little sister that is just like someone that you help.
Big Brothers.
Big Brothers. There you go.
Brothers of America.
Big Brothers of America. So, because I think it's all comes down to mastery, right? Study, practice, and teach. So if you see these last 3 buckets, you'll understand where it falls in. So that's the teach bucket, the mentee bucket. Then you have your growth bucket. This is your peak performance partners. This is your dream team, is what I call them. These are people that have similar core values and that are headed towards the same type of goals. I think dreams is a little heavy, and I understand that, but I think it's important to dream big. And even if kids don't know what their dreams are, like I ask people all the time, like, what are your dreams? And almost everyone looks at me like I have 8 heads, which to me, it's a strong indicator we are not doing a good job of creating a dream-oriented culture with strong goal consciousness, because if we were, people would have, more concise answers. But so that's the growth bucket. And then on the far right, you have your mentor bucket. And this is your coaches and your mentors. And by coaches, it can be a coach, an athletic coach. It can be someone like me who tutor. It can be a tutor. It could be anyone who, my girlfriend, her name's Jenny. Her father actually passed away last year, but he was a strong role model for me growing up. This is kind of your role model bucket. And it's weird because he went to WPI as well. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't have gone to WPI if it wasn't for him. I remember there's this one trip up to Maine. We were just talking for like 4 hours, and Jenny was like, was I even in the car? And this was back when I was 17, because we dated in high school as well. But the point is that we took a little 10-year break, short 10-year break between high school and after college. But I think that having the framework of a mentor, like, it's a different dynamic just by the label, because you're there to learn. And one of the things that's super important with coaches and mentors is giving them permission to tell you the truth. As soon as you call someone your mentor, they know that you're there to learn. They know that you're there to grow. They know that you're there to have your snow globe shaken up. Kids, and me especially, like, we fall on one end of the spectrum. I noticed this. Kids are either far on the self-doubt end, or they're far on the ego end. And if you think about it from growing up, we all try to avoid pain. Some people shell up and other people puff up, right? So you've got the puffer fish who, puff themselves up and think they're awesome and stay in rooms with people that are all worse than them subconsciously because they want to keep their ego. And then you've got the self-doubt end, which is people that are like too intimidated to maybe challenge themselves and even try. On one end, you have someone who's too scared to get a coach. On the other end, you have someone who thinks they don't need one, right? So I call it the drive to 5. You have 0, 10, and then driving to 5. And the only way to drive to 5 is to have big dreams that force you to put in more reps, more actions, that we call it failing forward. So one person is pessimistic on the self-doubt end. They're going to literally learn through the reps that they can do it. Oh my God, I can do this. Oh my God, I can do this. Someone who's got the ego is going to fail forward and get humbled each time. Like for me, I fall on the ego end. I know that, especially growing up. And so every time I would put in the reps toward my dreams, I always thought it would go better than it went. My first fitness show, I thought I'd win. I got 5th. My second fitness show, I did get 1st because I made the mistakes. I didn't make the same mistakes the second one. But then the third one, a year later, I made the same mistakes I did on the first one. I thought I'd win. I got 4th. So for me, taking actions toward my dreams humbles me, and it makes me a better human being. For someone who's on the self-doubt end, and I think this is the majority of people based on what I've seen, they think it's gonna go horribly. like this podcast, for example, if I was on the self-doubt end, I'm a pessimist in my mind, right? So I think, oh, this is going to be horrible. I'm going to say something wrong. I have something in my face. And then they're going to put in the rep. And then they're going to go, oh my God, that was awesome. I can do this, right? So either way, having the big dream, which is your why power to take positive action, is going to bring you to either humility or self-confidence, depending on which extreme you're on based on the traumas of your past.
You said something last time, Alan, that just kind of blew my mind, and I wrote it down and I've kind of written it like all over. You said, dream so big and so close to your heart that your dream inspires you to do epic things for yourself and beyond yourself. And that was just like, after we hung up that day, I was just like, like I just fell in love with you. And I thought that was just really profound. And I think I've talked to my son about it, and I just think that it's awesome that, you know, that you're so articulate in these things and that you're encouraging these young people to just really go all in. You know, it's amazing to me. So
I like when you say it. You make it sound way cooler than it is. I was very profound coming from you. I like that.
Well, it was
Thank you.
from you, obviously, because it blew me away. So loved it.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
You said, Alan, when we were talking about kids, hero kids needing to have a dream, something that stood out to me that I wrote down that you said that I thought was so brilliant. Being smart is the solution and the key to everything. Now, we always push our kids to get good grades. Like, we think that everything hinges on that. But I have a feeling it has a lot more to do than just getting an A in every class. What did you mean by that when you said that?
So, I'll try to make this short. I tend to be long-winded. So in college, the very first time that I studied entrepreneurship I was at WPI. I was in a master's program called Marketing and Technological Innovation. And I took an entrepreneurship course. And for some reason it clicked. It was like, okay, if I work hard enough and I get smart enough and I master this game, so to speak, I can literally live any life I want. And so that's actually one of the reasons why I'm creating something called the Lazaros Project. It's a charity that I want to basically bring a project-based entrepreneurship course to high schools and facilitate the first few years so that the school will see the value and then bring entrepreneurship to the entrepreneurial revolution is upon us. The internet has made, 30 years ago, you needed 30 grand and a warehouse to like start a company. Now, you need a cell phone and a really, really smart brain who's willing to learn and grind. So I think that the earlier we can connect with kids that working hard and working smart is what will get them literally anything they want. Like, what's the difference between me and someone else who's out of shape? I am willing to work harder and more consistently in fitness. And I learned the game by being willing to get around a mentor and learn from someone who already had the result. So as soon as, this is kind of the problem, and I teachers are the most near and dear to my heart. So I do not in any way want this to sound bad, but I do remember one specific teacher in my school, and I won't name any names, but it was in high school. He was a biology teacher, great teacher with a big heart. Here's the problem. Kids are way smarter than we think. If we are not living examples of it, we will not listen. And it's subconscious, it's not conscious. So for example, this guy was a great human being, okay? A very nice human being, great teacher. And I noticed this, but he was out of shape. He was broke. He was divorced. He drank a 2-liter Diet Pepsi every single day. He was miserable. And I have nothing but compassion and empathy for what he was going through. But what I noticed is that kids wouldn't listen. I always say this, if Tom Brady taught geometry in New England, everyone in New England would know the Pythagorean theorem, because it's not what you're teaching, it is who is teaching it. And kids are really, really attuned with whether or not that person is embodying that which they are teaching. There are a lot of personal trainers, to be completely frank, out there that maybe don't practice what they preach. And so I think that to go back to your original question, once we can link up with a kid that if they work hard enough and they work smart enough and they're willing to learn, they can have anything they want and they can choose whatever they want. They really need to connect that. They need to connect me being smart equals me getting whatever I want, whether it's a Lamborghini, a great body, because what do kids care about, right? They care about Lamborghinis, they care about good bodies, they care about girls and guys and stuff like that. But they need to link up that learning is the solution somehow to the desire. And those desires will shift and they'll very quickly realize that it's much deeper than having a nice body, right? At first it's, I want to look good on the beach. And then eventually it's like, oh my God, I can teach people fitness and I can do all these other things, right? So.
Well, I think it's important too that we're not talking necessarily about organic intellect or intelligence. We're talking about if you apply yourself and you learn how to play the game. That's something my grandfather taught me when I was a kid. You need to learn how to play whatever game you're in. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you need to figure out how to figure shit out, period. If you can learn how to figure the game out, you can win the game. You don't necessarily have to have the highest IQ. And I think that's important because some kids, have that lack of self-confidence where they don't feel like the smartest person in the room. It doesn't mean that you can't win, right?
That's so important. And
right.
I think that goes to role modeling as well. Most of my mentors are people that didn't even graduate college. They're brilliant and they are very, very good at like working hard. If there's anything 6 million years of evolution has taught us, it's that human beings are going to adapt to whatever arena they're in. If you look at like LeBron James, he had a basketball in his hand at 4. Tom Brady, like how long has he been playing football, right? So it's consistency over time in the right arena. The problem is that kids don't find their thing always that young. So it's trying to figure out some progress is better than no progress. Some direction is better than no direction. We learned that at Brendan's HBA Live by Lewis Howes. And so I think it comes down to getting them to think like, okay, once I find something I'm passionate enough about, then I can figure out how to be the best at it. And then eventually how to monetize it and create a life around it.
Great.
And that's a really good point because mastering the game is, if I were to just like encapsulate being smart as a solution and the key to everything, means master the game, whatever game you're in, like Michelle said. There is a lot of time sometimes that some of these kids need to figure out what game am I in. Mm-hmm. So even just the pursuit of which game am I in is a form of mastery, right? I mean, just like being able to toe dip and experiment here and there. Because some parents are like, oh my God, my kid is 12 and he doesn't know what he wants to do for a living, and they're freaking out because they don't know how to like push them in that direction or start like putting all the ducks in a row for them to have the greatest this and the greatest that to get them to the greatest place of that thing. So we need to give our kids space to fall in love with the journey part of trying to discover what it is that they want to master. I mean, I feel like, tell me, Alan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that instilling ambition is absolutely critical because whatever arena they're in, they have to want to be better at it. Because mastery, like you said, it's universal study, practice, teach, consistency over time. The principles of mastery are the same in any arena. And if I look back at my life, whether it was basketball or snowboarding or video games or, getting good grades or college or whatever, I always had an ambition to be the best. That doesn't mean I was always the best. It just means I always wanted to be. And not the best in the room necessarily, but the best that I could be. And I think that whatever arena they're in, as long as they genuinely desire to get better at it consistently and that they have some level of competitive drive, I really think that that's where greatness is born. I think that, that's why human beings won the evolutionary thing and it can be friendly competition. And the problem with that is if you're on the ego side of the spectrum, you're going to inevitably gravitate, and this is my problem, gravitate towards rooms where you are the smartest and you are the best basketball player because you want to boost your own ego. it's really easy to think you're good at basketball until you play against LeBron James, right? And then on the self-doubt side, you're going to inevitably not want the challenge because you feel like, maybe not good enough. Maybe you won't even step on the court. So I think it's key to have them love something so much that they want to be good at it. They're going to gain self-confidence from that. And then they're going to inevitably want to go like, okay, I can get better at this and I want to be the best at it.
Mm. Yeah. And I love the balance there that you just pointed out. Like, it's okay to let them explore, but don't let that be an excuse for losing ambition, losing drive, losing that competitive edge. Just like, I don't know, like, don't go let them be passive, in other words, right? Still keep the ambition there.
Absolutely. So one thing I want to say, I feel compelled to say this right now. I think that if you look at the deepest problems in the world, it usually comes down to two things: ignorance and apathy. Either people don't know any better or they don't care, or both. So to me, ambition and passion, caring, and so ignorance is not knowing. So self-education, personal development is the solution to that. Apathy is not caring. So passion is the solution to that. And if they have someone in their life that they love dearly, that is super ambitious and mastery driven, they're inevitably that's gonna rub off on them.
Mm-hmm. And a recent thing happened in the last few years, is my son, he was kind of like floundering. For many years, I was not a good role model. So I had many years of my own floundering, and that's what he grew up mostly in. So he was pretty much already close to being an adult by the time I started changing my life around. So he's floundering. Wow, that's weird. Wonder where he learned that from. And so I'm helping him. I'm trying to help him, without telling him what to do, because he's an adult now, right? I can't tell him what to do. And so I basically just offered, like, what do you love? What are you excited about? And so he expressed a few things. And I said, okay, why don't you find one? We live in California. Find one of those in California. I'll pay for you to go experience that. Watch the person who's teaching it and see if that's something you want to do. And if it is, let's figure out a way for you to learn that. And I didn't really, when he told me what it was, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, are you serious? That's what you want to do? Like, come on, how about like president of a company, CEO? Yeah. Like, why don't we go for something like that?
Yeah.
But I stopped myself from doing that, because what I wanted him to do was just learn, like go somewhere and learn something that he's excited about. And if he falls in love with learning, then he'll want to learn something more, something else. So like, what I know is that when I advance myself, then when I do the work to advance myself, opportunities that I didn't know exist come into my life. And so I just wanted that for him. I wanted him to go a little further, to have those opportunities be expanded in front of him, and realize that if I push a little, so much more happens for me. And then he would land eventually on something that was going to be like, that would stick, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that piece of it was a big lesson for me. And also trust was huge. Wanting to control what he's doing because I don't trust that he can make a good decision was also something that held him back. And when I didn't trust, and when I didn't facilitate opportunities for him to learn in something that he was passionate about, he ended up going with something that was easy, that wasn't fulfilling for him, and it wasn't good for him, but it was just something so that he felt he had control. Yeah. And I thought I pushed him into choosing the lesser choice because I didn't trust him.
The first thing that I would say, and this is something that I plan on doing as a father one day, figuring out who. So there's that quote, right? You cannot influence someone unless you know what already influences them. So have you asked do you know who influences your child the most, or your children, I guess would be the next question? Because it's like, if they are ambitious, your children will be ambitious. If they're not, if they're timid, they're going to end up timid. It's what do they value, and who do they value, and what does who they value, those people, what do they value? Because it's going to transfer. So if, let's say, here's a great question. Who are your heroes? I would ask that. Like for me, Brendan Burchard, boom, absolute hero. And by the way, if you look at me, it's a direct there's a relevance there, right? Like why, like what I'm doing is very similar to Tony Robbins, to Brendan Burchard, to Greg Plitt in the fitness industry, right? So if you ask my heroes, you're going to see like there's a reason behind the curtain why I am who I am today. So with kids, it's like, I think that's a question that will really stir the pot. Who are your heroes and why?
Love that.
And that'll give you guys great insight into who is influencing them. Because I love the ownership that you took there about like you were floundering for a little while, but you don't know, maybe it was some other, maybe there's other people that he's being influenced right now that maybe aren't very ambitious. Like in high school, here's the thing, and I said this in the pre-podcast interview, the people that get valued in high school are almost, I wouldn't say not ambitious, but it's almost like that lackadaisical, like I don't give a crap mentality. And like, you have to be smart enough to realize that as soon as you're an adult, that is not cool anymore, man. Like it's going to get you nowhere fast. But I'm telling you, there's a thing there. Like I'm in high school, I was like the nerdy, like smart kid who wrote like, this binder consists of notes. And I literally got laughed at. I got made fun of all the time. And I used to have to be so smart to know, okay, these athletes who pretend not to give a crap are popular now and they're getting all the validation now, but that gratification is going to come later. You know, I was always told growing up, Alan, the smart girls are going to be the prettiest later on, and they're going to be the most valuable, and they're going to be successful, all this stuff. And it's like, my mom can tell me that all day, but we don't really know that that's true until I went to my 10-year reunion last year, and it's very obvious who, I have a philosophy, people who got a ton of validation without any work ethic never create the work ethic. So let's say someone was gorgeous in high school, just with genetics. What are the chances they built the habits necessary to sustain it, right? Whereas I have a friend of mine who had scars all over his stomach. He was bullied. He had a rat tail, and he was super insecure about his looks. Now he's a model in Hollywood, right? Because in our 30s, he was lifting before anyone else. Why? Because he was in pain for not being relevant. So people who got all of the praise for almost no, I shouldn't say no, but like people like a lackadaisical attitude, they tend to lock in on that. And I don't want to say that everyone who's popular in high school then isn't successful later, or everyone who's nerdy in high school is then successful later. Those blanket statements aren't true. But I do know there's a correlation between feeling insignificant from a young age and then gaining that significance from bettering yourself. And the compound effect of those habits over time is drastic. So I think asking about their heroes and their influences is a big thing. I just wanted to impart that.
You're correct. You are correct on that statement, though, because I'm sure all of us here could look back on high school and where our friends were and the popular ones or whatever, see where they are today. And that is true with our, with our high school also.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart a little bit because we kind of get locked in a little bit to a fate if we don't know any better. That's why I have the Hyperconscious podcast. It raises your awareness of these things. So now you're like, oh, I can choose. Like just because I'm popular in high school doesn't mean I can't be smart too. Like just because I'm an athlete doesn't mean I also can't be a bookworm, right? Like I was an engineer. I always thought you had to be smart or an athlete. Now I'm both, right? So it's just, we weren't taught this stuff early on from someone that we actually listened to. And I think that that's a travesty.
I feel so validated. I feel so validated.
Kelly was
like
a nerd.
Freaking stamp on my forehead.
Actually, Kelly, you were a nerd and an athlete.
I went the ugly duckling and an athlete. That's what gave me my sense
significance.
of self. But exactly. It was
well, speaking of like looking at our health, and being that ugly duckling or working hard to, or being validated because you have the genetics, whatever. Let's talk about HEROKIDS needing that health foundation. Now, some of us, when I was growing my kids, I was obese. And so I was that mom who was like, I'm going to eat this cheeseburger from McDonald's, but here you get a salad and you go to practice every day and just do, eat healthy and work out, and you're going to do what you're supposed to do. And then, in front of the coach. But then when they were home, then I was cooking up mac and cheese.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, it was very much do what your coach says, do what you're supposed to do to be an athlete, but I'm going to eat junk food over here and be obese. So like, that obviously didn't work because my kids grew up and became obese. They struggle with obesity. So when it comes to the Health Foundation, I know you have an awesome, awesome pillars that you teach. Can you help us understand when it comes to HEROKIDS needing that Health Foundation? How would you describe that in terms of being relevant for the kids today? How do we communicate that as moms?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I just want to say how much I honor you for I think that we've kind of developed this, I noticed this with a lot of people that they tend to not want to own the mistakes. You're so frank and about owning the mistakes. That doesn't mean you were a bad mother. It's just taking ownership, like, okay, I could have done that better. And now I'm going to, because I'm admitting it first. I just want to honor you for that, because I think that's a rare quality, and I really appreciate that, because I think a lot of our society is just like, oh, I was supposed to be that way. I was supposed to be that way. Like, who's going to sit you down and say, the last 20 years, you made a bad decision. It's okay. Own the bad decision first so that you can make a new one. I just love that about you. So I just want to say that. Absolutely. When it comes to your question about health. So first I'll say it comes down to influences again. It's the standard that is set is everything. That's going to be the thermostat. So I'm at what's called the Business Launch House in Jacksonville, Florida right now with my buddy, my co-host. He's actually the host of the Hyperconscious podcast and then one of my mentors. And I've been living here for the last, I think, 15 or so days. And Terrence McMahon, he's down 120 pounds this year, and his standards for his own health has, just by being around Kevin and I, has absolutely changed. I mean, we're weighing out our food. We've been weight training every single day. Kudos to him, because the first time he's been in the gym in 16 years, and he's totally killing it. So first and foremost, it's going to come, health always is going to come down to your influence as well. I think having extra wide power to be in shape is also super important. So I mentioned Ryan Moore, one of my buddies who grew up being bullied. He had a stronger reason to work on his health and on his physique than someone who was kind of naturally gifted, maybe. And those habits, that discipline that he locked in early on, maybe from that source of insecurity, actually became something greater than that. So I think first and foremost, it's influences, as always. When it comes to the fundamental pillars, the one big idea in all of my fitness coaching is that health is the foundation you build everything else on top of. I personally have had times in my life where I did not have my health, and it doesn't matter how rich you are. Nothing matters when you don't have your health. Literally nothing matters. And so I think that that's where we always need to start. And I think that the only way to instill that in kids is to really live and breathe that as a mom or as a parent, and set that standard. So the pillars are all five. So the big idea is that the health is the foundation that you build everything else on top of. And most people are only building it on one or two pillars, at least consciously. So the first pillar is sleep. The second pillar is hydration. The third pillar is nutrition. The fourth is training. And then the fifth is mobility. And they're actually in order of most importance based on what would kill you if you didn't have them. So sleep, you'd die before without water. Water, you'd die before without food. Exercise, you'd die before mobility, right? So mobility, you can kind of go basically years and years and years without. You get the tier structure. But that's what I do with my clients every week, is we rate them on all five pillars. And I can dive deep into each pillar if you'd like me to, and kind of give the myth understandings that I think hold people back the most. But I think creating a foundation and a culture of health consciousness is absolutely critical. Like if I were to, earlier today, if T-Mac was like, we were at Panera, we're getting salads, and Kevin asked, like, how many calories in the salad? I know you get it all the time. And I'm immediately like 800. Right. I always use the analogy of, like, if you were hanging out with Steve Jobs, talking about integrated circuits, he's not going to go like, integrated circuits? Like, what is that? Right. You have to raise your awareness and dive deep in the understanding of things like calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, before you're ever going to really be able to fish on your own. The quote that I use all the time, and I tell my clients this, I'm literally going to make you so good at fitness that you no longer need me. You'll still want me, but you don't need me. And I'm going to teach you how to fish rather than give you a fish. I think the fitness industry in particular is very good at giving out fish. But if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So that's my whole thing. I want to educate people on the fundamentals and get them to stop with this tornado of misinformation of things that just aren't, they don't matter that much if you're not first doing the pillars that matter most.
This is like
Absolutely agree.
incredible, absolutely incredible podcast. Wow.
Thank
Alan,
you so much.
More Allens.
I know. And just more of this Alan would be really nice too. So speaking of which, I do want you to go deep on the pillars. I don't have time to go on this podcast, but I would love it if you would come back and do another podcast to help us understand how do we take our kids deep to create foundation using your 5 pillars.
Absolutely.
So we'll definitely for that one. Ladies, did you have any questions on the Health Foundation piece?
Oh, I don't have a question on the Health Foundation, but I have a personal development question.
Love it.
Can I ask that?
No.
Of course you can.
Are you asking me or are you asking
She's
Paul?
been picking on me all day.
I love
Okay, so my question is, obviously personal development is a huge, huge, huge part of your journey. So for young people listening, I would like to know, what was your first personal development experience and what kind of directed you to even delve into personal development from the get-go?
Yes, we mentioned this question in the pre-podcast and we wanted to wait. So believe it or not, I am not as far into my personal development journey as you might think. This is somewhat of a long story. I'll try to make it short. So I did the high school thing, went to college, did the college thing, went into corporate America, and I rose very fast. As you know, I was an electrical and computer engineer. I got a master's in marketing and technological innovation. My father, who passed away when I was 2, as I mentioned, was in sales and really good with people. So I did really well in sales, technical sales in particular, for a lot of different companies. I went into engineering first, didn't like that. Then I worked for another company in software sales. Then I went to global product management. Then I went to a different marketing team. And then I eventually landed on a company called Cognex, where I sold industrial automation equipment, which, as you know, automation is huge right now. So we were just blowing up, and I rose fast, started an inside sales team, went into outside sales, and made a lot of money. But long story short, it kind of ate away at me because I was selling. I would go into these factories. I had a lot of really big name clients or customers, and I managed basically Western New England, so Connecticut, Vermont, or New Hampshire rather. No, Vermont, and most of like Western Mass. And I saw on the walls pictures of these factories with tons and tons of employees on them. And now, quite literally, it's all robots and cameras and maybe one floor manager or 2, right? And the companies that I was going into were, there were some people that were inspecting things. So like I have an Nalgene bottle right here. Like the cameras that we sell would take really, really quick microsecond photos of this and make sure it's all perfect. It's just quality assurance. But other people used to actually look at it and make sure it was good, right? So the better I did, basically, the less jobs there were, because we also had the cameras that guided robots. And so this is a very big thing right now where all companies, as minimum wage rises, are automating quickly. Okay, robots are getting more functional. Machine vision is getting more functional. Cognex is the biggest machine vision company in the world. And long story short, you have a population rising exponentially with a job market decreasing exponentially, especially when it comes to, labor jobs. Anything that you do with your hands is kind of going away. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're going to automate a lot of things. I think consumer robotics, eventually we're going to have walking, talking robots in our houses in the next couple decades. So anyways, the only reason I can say that is I worked at iRobot. I've worked in a lot of these companies. I have a lot of mentors that are big in the tech industry. But long story short, I was miserable because deep down I was selling equipment that would take jobs, and I was making a lot of money doing it. And it bothered me a lot. I would party a lot. I was drinking a lot, as I mentioned. In college, I had a little bit of a drinking problem, but it wasn't a problem because it's college, right? And then you get into corporate America, and it's work hard, play hard at Cognex, and there's a drinking culture there, to be frank. And so I had what everyone thought was success, which is the beautiful girlfriend, tons of friends, parties all the time, tons of money, casinos, gambling, all that stuff. And I wasn't a bad person. I was a good dude with a good heart who wanted good things for good people. But to be frank, I had some bad habits, and I was definitely living a little bit of a life of excess. And so long story short, there were 2 incidents that really turned it around for me. Number one, I got jumped by a schizophrenic in the Province Place Mall. And we weren't at some bar room or anything like that. It was a Sunday night. There were little kids around. We were paying for parking. And I got punched in the face from the right. And I turned around and I saw evil in this person's eyes, and I ran. I thought one of 2 things when I saw his eyes. Either this person thinks I'm someone I'm not, like a gang or something. Are you guys still there, by the way? Because it froze.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Either sorry, pattern break there.
Like on the edge of our seat.
Just making sure. So either he's in a gang, or no, either he thinks I'm in a gang, or thinks I'm someone I'm not, or he's psycho, right? And it turned out to be the second. He was a schizophrenic, and he didn't take his medicine, and for whatever reason, he was at the movie 300, the second one, which is the most violent movie ever, and his wife forgot to have him take his meds. Long story short, my buddy Kiki stayed. Fight or flight, Kiki chose neither. He didn't fight or run. So Kiki got beaten up bad, and that was a really traumatic time for me because I thought Kiki would run, and he got beaten up because I ran. And I've known Kiki my whole life, and that was just a super emotional time where I just started questioning everything. Like, what can I do differently? Like, if he had a knife, I'd be dead. So that was when I started. The snow globe was shaken up big time. That's when I started questioning life, right? Like, am I doing this right? And I'm sure all of us have had that experience at one point or another. 3 to 4 months later, I believe, I was up in New Hampshire, and I was supposed to yield right, and I turned left to try to, it was like a really weird intersection that apparently a lot of people get in accidents on, but I'll never forget this. Lift-kitted truck, big red lift-kitted truck and headlights. And I looked down at my GPS for 2 seconds. I think we were going to like a Longhorn or something with my little cousin. And then I look up, and it's like right there. And I was just like, had that moment, this could be it moment. And fortunately, I was in a Volkswagen Passat, and those things are steel traps. It was like a 2004, I think, and it was just a really, really safe car. Both airbags deployed. You know, my little cousin got like his knee hurt, and I like had some bruises on my face or whatever from the airbag. But fortunately, the airbags deployed, and me and him were okay. He's 17, that invincible mentality. He's already tweeting about it, like, oh my God, got in a car accident, right? And I'm just messed up because I'm at this time, I think 26. And as you know, my father passed away when he was 28 in a car accident. So this is when I really started questioning life. I mean, this hurt me, one of my darkest moments, where I was just like, I have not been, like, if that was it, I have not done what I'm here to do yet. And I was just so dissatisfied with the way I had been living because, yeah, I had the money and the beautiful girl and the fucking degrees. Pardon my French. I'm sorry.
We love French.
But we can blurb that out if you'd like. But I just got so upset with the fact that I just wasn't living a life that I felt was super meaningful. And so I think we've all had maybe life or death, near-death experiences that wake us up. Mm-hmm. I read a book after that called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. She's an Australian woman who's absolutely wonderful. And long story short, she worked in hospice for a time where she worked with the terminally ill. And she quickly realized that her mission, her job was not really just to take care of them, but it was to listen. And all of them had the same regrets over and over again. She noticed these patterns over time of like, they all had the same regrets. I actually have a flashcard in my pocket right now with The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. That's the name of the book, by the way. The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. I'm hoping she comes on the podcast at some point. She's reached out to me a few times on Instagram. But the point is the number one regret of the dying is I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. So for me, that was my quantum moment. That was the moment when I realized like I kind of was always doing what society wanted me to do, and I was successful in the eyes of society, but I was not successful in my own heart. And that's when I started going deep into personal development. I don't know if you guys have seen Tony Robbins' TED Talk. If anyone's, are you guys there?
Yeah.
Yes.
I watched his YouTube and all that stuff. Yes.
Okay, so Tony Robbins' TED Talk, that was a quantum personal development thing for me, for sure. The 6 human needs, why we do what we do, start to question things. Another one was I met a man by Nate Smithson. He's still to this day my fitness coach, a dear, dear friend of mine. We speak every week, and he was already into personal development. And this is when my whole journey into personal development really started. And since then, I mean, it's been, the whole nine. I found Brendan. I get coached by my Aunt Joanne now every other week. I have mentors on mentors. Very, very blessed. But I wasn't always the conscious, put together, polished product you guys see in front of you right now. I mean, I think I had a big heart. I think I was a good guy who wanted good things for everybody. And I think that I was, maybe didn't have the best influences growing up, and didn't really self-reflect enough to really try to have success on my own terms. I was kind of trying to be what I think everyone wanted me to be rather than what I really wanted to be. So now part of my mission is to get people earlier to really question, like, why am I doing this stuff that I am supposed to do versus what I really want to do? Because if you guys have ever read the book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, it's my favorite book of all time. The reason why it's my favorite book of all time is because if you choose early what you really want, there's nothing stopping you. I mean, if you learned how to invest at 15, you would be a millionaire by 30, no questions asked, if you know how to do it. So you can master anything. The question no longer is how do I get validation from everyone else? The question is, what do I want to be world class at? And once you find that and decide I will be the best at this thing, and then you do that every day, everything you do, basically, this is one of the other big ideas we talked about in the pre-podcast. You're going to get really, really good at whatever it is that you're doing every day. So be really careful what you're doing every day. So that's kind of the long-winded version.
Amazing answer. That's a very, very inspiring story.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I didn't know people who
I
are your
really love
age could
this
go through
game.
so much.
And you're only 30. I'm
Right.
I'm sitting here tearing up going, oh my God.
I had to mute myself because I'm like,
You guys are my favorite. I love it.
Alan, if there's one thing I could say right now after listening to your story and listening to this podcast, one thing I would definitely recommend is it's not so much of getting into the schools of the teachers and all that, because the teachers have what they teach. But one thing that hit me home was you need to get connected with the high school counselors, because those are the ones that influence the children. Because I'm going back from my story, if it wasn't for my high school counselor, I would have never graduated high school. I would have never gotten into the career that I had gotten into. He was my big influence in my life because I didn't have anybody around me to mentor me, to guide me. They all thought I would end up in jail, just my lifestyle. I was the black sheep. And if it wasn't for that man, I would not be where I am today. And so that is why I'm sitting here. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, because it's those counselors that have the effect and the influence on students more than the teachers do. So think about that one.
I appreciate that so much. I've never thought of that before. So it's funny you guys mentioned that. My slogan for Alan Lazaros LLC, and you'll see why that I haven't gotten into as many schools as I would like. My slogan is what you'll never learn in school, but desperately need to know. Right. And so, so teacher, please hire me. Right. So,
Right.
I appreciate that very much. I really do.
I wanted for you here moms who are listening, I just wanted to give you like a couple, 3 things that I wrote down from all the awesome, amazing things that Alan shared with us today. That if you're wondering, like, if you're so inspired right now, if you've just been completely inspired like we have from what Alan has been talking about, and you want to take action to move forward, to be more relevant in the lives of your kids, to raise hero kids, 3 things that I wrote down that you can start right now that are free, and you just, start doing it, right? Make that difference, become relevant. And that is find out what your kids are geeking out on. 2 is find great role models in their areas of interest. And when we say great role models, Alan was very specific to say, not just people do well at what it is that this interest is, but they're actually really good human beings too. They got to have good hearts, right? And then also align their life with the dreams, starting with health and mindset. So you got to get those 2 things down. And get that strong foundation going for them to build off all the other things, because it can be a repetitive crash and burn otherwise if they don't have a health foundation and a mindset foundation. Right, Alan?
Absolutely. I love those 3. Those are phenomenal.
Now, what I loved in our pre-podcast, that also came from Alan, when I asked him to, if he could give himself, now at 30, looking back at his childhood, what words of advice, if he could go back and tell himself at that young age, what would you tell yourself? What would you have told your younger self?
Drink less. No, I'm kidding.
You actually did say that last time. You did actually say that.
I agree with that.
So I love this question so much. What would I whisper in my ear? I think a lot of people struggle with this question in particular, because I always say this: if you're truly happy and fulfilled where you are, you'll not only be okay with where you've been, you'll be grateful for it, because it's what brought you here, right? None of us can connect the dots looking forward. But I will say this: I think it's not intelligent to have no regrets. And what I mean by that is that's why I loved what you did, Paula, when looking back and just maybe it's not a regret, but maybe it's I could have done better there, because I think that brings incentive to do better in the future, just inherently in our mind. Mm-hmm. So what would I do differently? I would definitely go inward more often, try to figure out what I really want to do in the world. Instead of just constantly trying to be what others wanted me to be. I would definitely read more books. And again, I would focus more on my habits. So let me be more specific by that. So there's my formula for success, I shouldn't say mine, Darren Hardy's: good habits plus consistency plus time equals massive difference, positive difference. Bad habits plus consistency plus time equals a massive negative difference. So to me, if you choose, I would say figure out what you want first. And once you do, reverse engineer the finish line. And what I mean by that is, your hours turn into days, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, months turn into years, years turn into decades, and then eventually that forms your life. And so focus on lifestyle design. Like, what is the ideal life that you want to live? And more importantly, what does the world need that your gifts and your talents can provide? So figure that out. And if that's your true north, that's why I wear this, by the way. This is the true north. This is the thing that guides me every single day. And it's unwavering. It's constant. It's the brightest star in the sky. It never moves. And not to be too corny, but like that's real for me. Like I have this pyramid in my mind every single day where my core values are the bottom, my true north is the top, that's my purpose, and everything in between is the day-to-day logistics, habits, what you do and don't do. I think it's just important what we don't do as what we do. And so really, I call it the 3 columns exercise, and this is what I'll leave this question with. Good habits, bad habits, wish habits. Write 3 columns, and I'll define each. What is a good habit? A good habit I define as something that gets you closer to your goals and dreams that you also enjoy. A bad habit, something that brings you farther from your goals and dreams or is stagnant. It's like a neutral habit. The last one is wishful habits, habits you wish you had, but you're still struggling to create. And then basically what you want to do, and the neuroscience shows that every 21 days, it takes 21 days apparently to lock in a habit. I think it's probably more or less, give or take. But if you were to create one wish habit, so replace the bad habit column with the wish habit column, and you did 1 habit per 21 days, you could do 17 habits in 1 year. Now, I 4 years ago started personal development. You're seeing the very beginning of this polished product. I'm just getting started. I literally said that when I turned 30. I said, I'm just getting started. You haven't seen nothing yet. And that's because, to me, life is about the silence between the notes. What are you doing when no one's looking? I read this great quote by Tony Robbins. You guys have probably heard it. People are rewarded in public for what they've practiced for years, sometimes decades in private. I live by that every single day. The only reason I have the privilege to serve you guys and to be here is because of what I'm doing behind closed doors. Because of, I have this great picture that I always put up on my Snapchat story. And it's a picture of me helping a young girl lift a barbell. She's the cutest little thing. It's an adorable little photo. And there's little kids around. They're all clapping, right? And I'm like the fitness guy. And then I say in the middle, there's a black portion with text in it. And it says, you do not get to be this guy until you first want to be this guy. And it's a picture of me sweating, just kind of in pain, to be frank, in the gym at 5 a.m. So that's what I would tell my old self. I would say, stop living for today. Live for today, but make sure that it's bringing you closer to the bright future that you want to create. And more importantly, something that the world really needs.
Love that. That would be really amazing advice to your younger self.
I hope he would listen.
All you kids, there it is. There's the formula. I love the idea of the pyramid with the foundation and the North Star. I think that's very relatable for anybody. In fact, moms out there listening, dads, if you're listening, anybody who's listening could be implementing any of these concepts. But how amazing. In fact, we should. If we want our kids to do it, right? If we want our kids to be doing these things, we need to be doing these things. So, ladies, did you have any last things that you wanted to say on the topics for today? Are you good? Everybody's just like,
mind blown.
Right?
yeah. I have one thing I want to say. Moms, hero moms, put your freaking cape on. Step up and be the mom that your kids need you to be. And it's not that you haven't been trying. We honor the work that you've already been doing, but you're here because you're inspired to want to do more. So figure out what that next step is and go and do it. And that's it. And then you can take your kids to the next level, because when you rise, they rise.
Amen.
Amen to that.